it is very nostalgic to look at this figure. I haven't picked this guy up in years. Uh, I remember when I got him, I took so many photos with him in all kinds of action sequences I, that I could pose him into, even with that arm quality control issue. This figure means a lot to me. Not only was this my first ever Darkseid figure, like I said in previous videos, I've never had any other Darkseid prior to this one until recently with that Jack Kirby comic Darkseid. And before that, I've never owned any Darkseid figure at all because I wasn't collecting DC stuff and I wasn't really into the Mattel DC Multiverse figures at the time. So, very different period of my life. Seeing this guy again, just moving his arms, his legs, everything. It is so interesting that this is the first Mega figure. This was, and still, this is the originator of the Megafig concept, right? This is what allowed them to eventually re-release King Shark as a Mega figure, as a Walmart Gold Label Mega figure, right? So they took the build figure and then they just slapped it into the Mega Fig box with the gold label and just repainted a little bit of it just to resell it. So now, if you don't collect this line, you may be asking, what is a Mega figure? Well, I mean, the name Mega figure is already simple as it is. It's just an oversized figure. But not of any figure, right? It's not like a giant Batman. It is a line dedicated to making certain characters that tend to be bigger in size and height in the scale to fit the scale with the solo 7-inch line. That was the original concept of the Mega figure. And it still is that concept to this day. So now, Mega figures have always been a mix when it comes to how they are handled. Some of them are impressive, some of them are less impressive. And when Darkseid and Steppenwolf came out, there were a little bit of a mixed feeling with these figures because at the time, with everything just on lockdown, most people were just home, and it's you're not spending on things unless it's a necessity. This guy cost $40, right? This is a $40 figure, and Mega figures are still $40. Mega figs in general are more pricier than the regular figures. I'm just kind of glad that they haven't swapped the prices on them right now because they've they've risen the prices of like the solo release figures by like a few dollars, and I'm kind of glad that Mega figures haven't suffered that yet. I hope they don't go up. But point is, this is a $40 figure, and are you getting much for $40 at the time when this was released? Yes and no. So, I guess from a more of like a positive standpoint, the yes is you are getting your first Darkseid. The yes is that this is a Darkseid that's never gone a figure form before, right? It was spanking new, right off the gate, right off the, with the release of the Snyder Cut, and then months down the road, it gets a figure. So, the positive is that this is the only version of the figure that will exist. Probably. At the time, that's what I thought. And I thought that over the course of a period, there'd be other companies making figures for this guy. I don't think I've seen any other companies make figures for this Darkseid. I've seen a statue of him, I believe, made by Prime One Studios, but I haven't seen Hot Toys or any other company just like take this design and just make it into a figure. So, and this was not the only Darkseid that was released. There were two versions of this figure. What you see in front of you is the mass retail version that you can get at any store. It's supposed to be his flashback version before he becomes Darkseid, right? Takes on the mantle of Darkseid before he discovers the Omega power and all that stuff. So this is supposed to be him in his prime, in his youth, when he was just still a naive, I guess, warrior. The Target exclusive version is the Darkseid that you see at the end of the movie, right? Where he's now the supreme leader of Apocalypse and stuff. So, do I call him Darkseid? I still call him Darkseid, because it doesn't matter if he has the armor or no chest armor. He's still Darkseid, right? This is still the same character. So, and this was the only figure that I could use at the time for a lot of my photos. And I had so much fun taking photos, like, with this figure, putting them in displays with all the other villain characters that I have from this line. It's just fun. It was a very fun thing. I haven't even done that with the new Darkseid yet, and I probably will do it with the new Darkseid, because now that there's a comic Darkseid, it'll go even better with those figures. But even then, at the time when I had this guy, he was just a blast to just play with and just display on the shelf with. And now that I'm putting things in storage temporarily just to like clean things up and then make a new shelf where I can store these guys into, it's been a long time since I've looked at them, and it just feels so, like, I feel sad for like not looking at this figure constantly. It's just, but it is that thing where it's like over a period you just get bored of a figure and then you move on to a new figure. I never got bored of this guy, but he just sat in the back of my shelf for like a while, and I just never really looked at him. He just sat there, like he just stood there, and then now as I'm cleaning and I'm looking back at it, I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, now it's like I should be appreciating these figures more, right? Being a collector is one thing. You collect these things for fun, but you should collect these things with this, with this mindset where sometimes I want to look back at this figure because this figure is so damn cool. And this is what this Darkseid is to me. So, I had trouble recording this video because I did another recording of it. It just didn't feel right. It just didn't really emphasize my emotions with this figure. So, in the previous video, it sounded like I was being a negative Nancy to that comic book Darkseid, but I was trying to be more critical with how I felt about that figure, right? So, as I record more of these reviews, I am starting to figure out a format where I can just talk about things in different ways. Sometimes I'll be critical about something that I don't like. Sometimes maybe I won't even bring it up. I don't know. But in this case, I will still be critical with this figure. So, with this particular version of Darkseid. Like, it is my favorite figure, right, that I played with or messed with for photography, but I still have my grievances with it because it's not, like I said, there's no such thing as a perfect figure, so this figure still has its flaws. So, and I do want to talk about those flaws, but I also do want to talk about the good parts about this figure, which is the aesthetic. It's just, Mcfarlane nailed the way this figure looks. Like, he looks exactly like he walked out of the movie. Almost. Like, that's what I think. I mean, if you don't think that way, that's cool. but because there's no other version of this figure to compare to from other companies, except for that Prime 1 statue, of course, that looks way better in details, right? Because it's a statue. It's really hard to say, like, who did it better in terms of the figure that can articulate and stuff, right? Because you can't compare it to a statue. A statue is always going to look better because, you know, a statue is more expensive. It's highly sculpted with all kinds of details, and it doesn't move. So it's not a good comparison. And I don't even have that statue because, of course, that statue is, like, out of my price range. It is very expensive. So, but for a Darkseid figure alone, when this came out, this was probably a really cool figure that everybody just wanted. Like, everybody wanted this figure. I remember this figure did sell out for a period. It did sell out. And then eventually it just came back up in stock and started to become more accessible to everybody who wanted it. But I remember there was a time where this figure was just gone. Because love or hate the Snyder Cut for what it is, there are certain moments in that movie that are just amazing, right? The line with that Darkseid says in that movie is just so good. I don't know who voiced him in that movie, but that voice actor just killed it in that Darkseid role. Like, he just nailed this character for being who he's supposed to be. And this is why I got this figure, because this is a version of Darkseid that just had the same sort of, you know, presence like he does in the comics and even in the cartoons. So now that I said all that, I do want to get into the figure now. As you can see, this figure doesn't come with much, right? Like, everything is on him. So he has a spear and his and that's it. That's all he has. And then, of course, the traditional what do you call it? The DC stand, and then the card, which I don't have out right now. The picture on the card is just the photo of him when he landed on Earth in the movie, so it's the same photo. It's just that photo, so nothing too crazy. But yeah, not a lot of stuff, right? And this is where, jumping back to the price point thing, it's like, was this thing worth $40 in terms of the accessory department? That's where you can probably say no, because a lot of Mega figures did not come with much, right? And it really varied, because if you look at Swamp Thing was probably worth paying $40 for. Swamp Thing's huge. Swamp Thing towers over this guy, which was kind of the shocker, and I'll show that comparison in the Swamp Thing video, because I think that Mega figure probably still is the biggest Mega figure that was ever made. So yeah, but being the first Mega figure, though, so let's not, say that he's the worst Mega figure, because he is the first one. He introduced the concept of a Mega figure. This guy is still impressive, even to this day. I still think he's impressive. So now there are good and bad on this guy. The grays are pretty decent. They do look like the gray that he was in the movie, kind of. However, I don't know why Mcfarlane opted for a more glossier paint on his skin tone, because this guy's skin is supposed to be like rocks, so it's supposed to be very matte finish. But yeah, there's a lot of glossiness on this guy's skin tone on his body. His face is the only part that doesn't have the gloss, which I don't know, my camera can show the face like in a good way, because he's so damn tall. Yeah, if you could see that, there's not much gloss with the face. It's very one type of like paint. It's like kind of like it's matte finish, but everything else is like very glossy. And then if you look at the skirt piece armor, it's also the same thing too. It's very, it's like they use this one sort of material to where it's soft, right? It's very soft. I don't know if it's like plastic or rubber. I don't know what it is, but again, it's just very plain in that color. But that's what it looks like in the movie, where it's just like that one blue. I think there's a way to bring out that detail a little bit more, but you know, for a mega figure at the time, you got to work with what you have, right? So, yeah. As far as weapon, which you see in his hand, it's a very cool weapon. There's a lot of details on that weapon too. So there is a lot of sculpt work on this weapon that I feel is hidden by the paint, because it's also just using one sort of paint. So that kind of hides a lot of the nice sculpt work on it from the distance if you're looking at this weapon. So there's that. And then in terms of those type of aesthetics, there's not much going on with this figure, because it's kind of like the one yesterday, right? It's like, or yeah, when I recorded that review yesterday, it's like that Darkseid. It's very simple in the colors and the details. It's not too over complicated with the details, but and also honestly, like when you look at the design of what he looks like in the movie, yeah, I mean, you can't really you go too crazy, right? I mean, his face is where most of the detail is, right? The eyes and stuff. And this is where I feel like they could have done something with the face. Notice how his expression is kind of mute. It would be kind of cool if he had another head where he's like angry or pissed off at the, you know, at humanity and the gods trying to literally kicking him off the planet. Like, don't ever come back here, right? So, it was just a missed opportunity for them to give him an alternate head. And I think to this day, a mega figure has never come with an alternate head. Not even Swamp Thing. Like, Swamp Thing does have an alternate head, but that's a whole different story when I get to that figure. But because that review I think might be the biggest review. This is not just one Swamp Thing. But for him, yeah, he that's all he has in terms of accessories to make his aesthetic look cool. And articulation is pretty simple. He's a pretty simple figure. So his arms can do that, right? Can lift up. I'm gonna pop this hand off, as you can tell, because you've seen that QC already in the last video. I showed it. It can do that. His hands can rotate, like his arms can rotate back and forth like that. So it's a really good range of motion, because these big guys, they don't have butterfly joints. As you can see, there's like a big gap in there. But that big gap, what it does is that you can push the arm down or you can push the arm up. So you can do you have a lot of room to just move this arm, right? Of course, this top part, you can do this. And then the good old double jointed arms, right? Double jointed. So you would think a mega figure would probably have single joints. Well, some of them do, right? And some of them are basically an oversized version of a 7-inch figure, so they don't have the double. So they have the double joint. However, this figure is very interesting. He has the double joint, but he does for the arms, but he doesn't have it for the legs. The legs are single jointed, and I apologize if I can't get this leg to go back more, because these legs were so stiff at the time, and they still are. But they're a single joint, so, and they do have this rotation down here, right? So there's that. So yeah, he has single jointed legs, which is interesting. I don't know if it's because of his design in the movie that they couldn't opt for a double jointed knee. Maybe I mean, his legs do look like they're long enough to have one, but or it could be because of the boots, maybe. So there's that, and then you have your good old, the legs can, the feet can do that. The feet can also do toe articulation, and can this guy kick outwards? Kinda, but that front skirt armor is gonna get in the way. Can he kick backwards? No, not really. So there's that problem. Can he do the splits? No. I mean, he can spread his legs out, but he can't do like straight up splits. So there's that. And then can his torso move? His torso can move. His torso and waist cut can move, but on my copy, they are very stiff. Like, this top part will move, kinda. It does rock, like, side to side. But that bottom piece, that thing doesn't move. I've heated that up before, and it's still been a pain to get it to do anything. And I just don't want to force it anymore because I feel like I might snap something off. I don't want to do that. His head. Can this... So it can go, he can look this way, he can look that way. Can he look up? Yes, he can. He can look up all the way, which is pretty cool. But he can't look down. Or he can barely look down. So there's that limitation right there. And lastly, the hands can rotate. So there's that. And then these hands can bend. However, as you can see, the joint is very ugly. It's a ratchet joint of some kind. It's very ugly. So certain poses you're not gonna like his hands to be in. So there's that problem in terms of his hands. Now, that is the articulation segment for this guy. There's not much going on with him, and yes, his arm is off, and that part sucks, right? Like I said, that part sucks. But I still did a lot of photos, even with this problem. And I figured out how to fix this now, so I probably might try to get this fixed today with another type of super glue where I can just let it dry and then put it into the socket. So, but I don't want to end the review with his arm is gone. So there you go. But yeah, that is Darkseid. That is Darkseid from the Snyder Cut movie. And this is one heck of a figure, right? Like, it's not perfect. It still has its problems. There's one other thing I need to address before we end this. Oh, excuse me. I need to show this. Whoever engineered this figure that thought that this piece can hang by that thread right there, I don't know what you were thinking. That piece right there, to this day, I still think will break. It scares me, even just doing that in this video. So, if you have this figure, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you've seen it. It exists on the other version as well because it's literally the same figure. So, yeah, I don't know who the heck thought that was a good idea for engineering the skirt armor to be like that. It should have just been one solid piece that just didn't move, like the front piece. It should have been something like that. So, yeah, so it's not perfect, but it is still a very cool figure to look back at, and this is one heck of a figure to have. And I still... Now I want to take more photos of him again. So with that, this is the end of this review for Darkseid from this version for the movie. And I hope all of you have a wonderful day, and take care.